Okay, welcome back. It's the brief segment here on the Breakfast Show on Ghana Television, where we discuss very interesting issues and interesting topics for you. Ones that will tickle your fancy and ones that will make you begin to ask questions. So if you have any questions at all to ask us, don't worry. We'll give you the text line pretty shortly. Then you can access those questions. Today we're talking about air safety or air transportation safety. You quite remember I was sharing a story with them. There was a story I got to know about. There's this little boy who was traveling in an aeroplane actually, and suddenly they were up there in the air. Then the pilot announced that they have some challenges with the plane, technical challenges with the plane. So they should see how best they can fasten their seatbelts and not expect anything at all to happen. People in the plane, older men and women started praying, some saying all sorts of things. They were just filled with fear. And it was this little boy who was sitting by one older man, and the boy was just laughing, playing, eating, drinking. Fortunately for them, the pilot managed to land the plane safely. So when they all moved out of the plane, the old man approached the little boy, then asked the little boy, "Hey you, when we were told we were about to die, you were in that plane laughing and eating." Then the boy sighed for a while and said that I knew we were not going to die. Then the old man asked the boy, "Why?" And the boy replied, "Because the pilot there is my father. And I know my father who will not let us die." That's the kind of faith, that's the kind of confidence, that's the kind of trust that little boy had in the father. But it's just a story just to start with our conversation as we talk about air safety and air safety transportation with what is happening or what has happened to the Malaysian aircraft, which has raised lots of questions. So my guest for us to talk about this, I have Ibad Ibrahim, who is no stranger at all to us here. He's an international news and security analyst. And also Stanley Semako. Yes, he is a psychologist and also a lecturer at GIJ. Then Daniel Akwa, the Director of Safety Regulations at the Ghana Civil Aviation Authority. They've joined us for us to talk about safety when it comes to the airplane, when we are up there. And I'll start with you, Dan. When you heard about this whole Malaysian thing, first of all, what was the first thing that came to mind?
First of
At
all,
least you coming from the aviation industry itself.
yes, I thought of it as something being impossible. But then from the news, and then the following day, a friend of mine, early in the morning, it was Sunday, a friend of mine brought up the issue again. So then I had to actually set up or wake up and started thinking about the whole issue. First of all, an aircraft, depending on its size and amount of fuel it can take, it means it can stay in the air for a certain amount of time, which we call the endurance. And thinking about the lapse of time, it was almost impossible for that type of aircraft to stay in the air. So that kind of confirmed that actually something had happened. But then the next thing was actually to find out what has happened or whether the aircraft can be located. Because initially we were thinking that it could be a hijack situation whereby the aircraft has been landed somewhere unknown to the rest of the world.
Which is possible.
Which is possible. But then normally hijackers would make some sort of demands, and the various hijacking groups also try to take credit of such incidents. So we're expecting a group to come out to praise itself for being successful in hijacking an aircraft, but for some time nobody was claiming anything, and that really confirmed that yes, actually something had happened. But then, unless in accident investigation or during a crash, you can only confirm that an aircraft has actually crashed when you've been able to sight its debris. Or air traffic control has actually confirmed that it's a crash. So it was quite a thorny issue and a difficult one. But then, as an aviation expert, we always wait for proper investigation to be done. Then we put in the necessary measures to prevent such an event.
We'll come to other areas too when it comes to when the plane is taking or some of the checks you have to go through and all that. But at least you've been following international news and also following other things linking it to this particular incident. Bring us up to speed. What's the latest when it comes to this whole Malaysia?
I think, George, as fellow citizens of the world, we are not Malaysians, neither are we Chinese. More than 50% of the victims were from China. Yeah, but as fellow citizens of the world, our hearts bleed and utter in grief for the people who have died in this tragic incident. I'm sure their relatives were so happy when they bade them farewell, but unfortunately they saw in the news that their plane actually crashed into the ocean. The emotional toll would be quite enormous in any situation, and therefore our hearts go out to them. But you know what? You can surrender what has happened to fate because the international community has really shown solidarity.
Yeah.
Currently, some 80 ships and aircraft from 26 different countries are engaged in the search, and therefore,
Including the funny one from Ghana.
it's-
Just the funny one from Ghana.
why do you claim that ours is funny?
It's kind of funny. I mean,
No, we are contributing our quota. We
You've
are
seen that picture I'm
empathizing.
talking about?
Exactly, we
Okay.
are empathizing with the people. In their time of distress, the world should provide them redress, and therefore, as part of the community of international states, Ghana is also contributing its quota. But we are yet to unravel the enigma or mystery surrounding the loss of a plane. Some say, well, let's surrender it to fate. But I think lapses in the aviation industry cannot be taken lightly. For all you know, I think I would fault the Malaysian government a bit because initially, just as the aviation expert has mentioned, they claimed that it was a terrorist attack. Two of the people who were aboard the plane had flown on fake passports.
Yeah.
One was an Austrian passport and the other was an Italian one. And therefore, that took the wind out of the sails of the experts who were trying to glean snippets of information about the whereabouts of the plane. Because if it was hijacked, then perhaps it would deliberately land somewhere. And therefore, I think that delayed the search a bit. And by the time the international community realized that there was no foul play, it was too late. But the expert may come in. I know so well that airplanes don't just fly like that. Within the cockpit, we have the transponders and as well as the black boxes. We call the boxes, they are two because they come in a pair. Even though they are black, they are called black, but they are orange in color. So therefore, I think the clues will be gleaned. Exactly.
Have you moved the plane before?
I haven't moved one, but I know so well that the purpose of the transponder is to send signals to the radar station on the ground. But this airplane flew at 40 minutes past midnight. And only 40 minutes into the flight at 1:20 a.m., it went under the radar. And therefore, I know there will be a treasure trove of evidence and information that will be gleaned at the end of the day when we are able to find the transponders as well as the black boxes. But the black boxes cannot be there forever. The battery has a lifeline of 30 days, but it is capable of storing all the information at least some hours before the crash of the plane. So I know so well that the hopes of finding those 239 people alive are dashed currently, and the Malaysian government has told the world there is no way after 3 weeks, unless maybe there's another miracle in the world, after 3 weeks of losing touch with those people aboard the plane, there's absolutely no way we would be living in a fantasy world that we would find them alive. But I think there are lessons to learn from this, and the black boxes would throw up a lot of information for us. For example, in 2009, Air France also crashed. And it took the international community 23 months to locate the debris. And at the end of the day, they could eavesdrop upon the snippets of information and discussions that took place within the cockpit. So the international community can learn some lessons from this, but hopes of finding those people alive have really been
Just
dashed.
within this week, we're told that they found some debris at on the Indian Ocean. Could there be some signs that gradually we're getting there?
I think we are hazarding guesses at this moment because the ocean is quite a large expanse of water, and there could be just anything in the ocean. The ocean doesn't absorb, it doesn't consume anything that has no life, and therefore just anything, an aircraft there, a ship debris here from other, people that are sailing and all that could all be thrown up on the surface of the water. But I'm very happy that now they've zeroed in on some 11,000 kilometer radius of the Indian Ocean. So I'm sure within the next few days we'll have some important pieces of information.
Stanley, don't worry, you're not left out. We'll come to you. You have a very special case here to handle. So let me turn my attention quickly to Daniel. Daniel, what will make a plane move off the radar?
For a plane to move off the radar, then the first place means the transponder has been turned off. Basically, that is it.
Which could be deliberate?
Yes, could be deliberate. Or, of course, for the transponder to go off, if it's not deliberate, then it's possible it's either faulty or some electrical system. Yes, it's malfunctioning.
So it brings you to my next question. Before the plane takes off, take us through the processes that plane will have to go through. Checking the plane, making sure that everything works well and all that, before even the pilot sits in.
Yeah, before the plane takes off, if it is the first flight for the day, most probably engineering will sign the documentation, go through the various checks, and position it on the apron or tarmac. And we have a unit we call the flight dispatch unit. Basically, they are operational. They have operational control of the aircraft, but then they look at the documentation from engineering and know which systems are malfunctioning, which systems are okay. And we have a manual. It's quite an elaborate one, big one. We call it the minimum equipment list. So, for example, if your transponder is not working, it will be stated in that manual. It will tell you how many transponders are installed in the aircraft and how many should be operational or serviceable before the aircraft should take off. If you take, let's say, an air conditioning system for the aircraft, it must be pressurized. The aircraft must be pressurized as it flies above a certain altitude. So normally you have 2 air conditioners. The minimum equipment list for that particular aircraft will tell you maybe 2 installed. At least 1 should be operational. If both are not operational, then you must fly maybe below 10,000 feet, because within 10,000 feet you can breathe normally without pressurization in the aircraft. So we have this manual. The flight dispatch and engineering will go through and know all the systems that are not functioning, and then from that you'll be able to deduce whether the aircraft can actually be operated. So we call them a go or no-go item. A no-go item means the flight must be cancelled for that particular aircraft. Another aircraft should be positioned, sort of. So basically, this is what goes through at the flight dispatch. The captain reports at the airport. He goes to the flight dispatch section. He's briefed on the systems that are not working. Some of the systems, if they are not working, you need some kind of maintenance or operational requirements. Maybe you have to pull certain circuit breakers. And he has his checklist he goes through, and he also gets the load manifest. Traffic or the check-in counter will furnish the flight dispatch section with the total load, amount of fuel that should be carried on board, including diversion fuel and holding fuel in case it gets to destination, and the weather it's such that it must hold for some time before landing, or there's so much traffic that it must stay in the pattern. There are a whole lot that goes on. He also must be briefed about the weather. So the weather, the flight dispatch office will have the weather charts for that very flight or that day. And you also have a printout of the various segments of the flight. Maybe from between Accra, Lomé, you must fly at this level. Between Lomé and that, you must change to that level. You must change your course. The amount of fuel burn for every sector is all calculated. It's done by flight dispatch.
And he's supposed to know all these
Yeah,
things.
so the pilot actually goes throughout this printout, and then he signs. That's what we call the flight release. He signs, and the dispatcher on duty also signs. It's a joint responsibility. The captain and the dispatcher, who doesn't fly with the aircraft, they have to sign. Then during the flight, the dispatcher also monitors the weather and would have to be communicating with the flight, because the weather is as good as 1 hour. whatever you predict, after an hour, it may change. So the dispatcher on ground will be monitoring the weather. If there is any change in the pattern of the weather, he must inform the captain through communication.
So the dispatcher keeps constant communication with
Yes.
the captain.
Yes.
So the captain gets to its final destination.
Yes, when necessary, communication when it's necessary.
When
Yes.
it's necessary.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Just a minute about that. If you just join us, so you are within the brief segment here on the Breakfast Show on Ghana Television. You can send us a text on 0244 668659. 0244 668659. If you have any question at all to ask us or some thoughts to share with us. We're talking about air transportation, linking it to the Malaysian aircraft. That's Boeing 777. An unfortunate incident that happened a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I think perhaps the experts in aviation would come in. From a security point of view, the US has got some equipment like unmanned drones that are able to pick GPS signals from any part of the world. So, for example, anytime you go onto the phone, then you are breaching your personal security because people can pinpoint your geographical location. But we have enough information that certain phone lines, cell phones of those passengers have been called and the phones have actually rang.
Right. And
So what
there was this
explanation can we
tweet
give
message
that?
also that was also going across.
Yeah,
too.
so I don't know. Does that mean it is still terrestrial or it has gone underwater, even though those phones still ring?
That's
a
the
strange
mystery behind all of these things, which we still try as much as possible to get answers
Some
to.
people have even gotten superstitious. They said perhaps the plane just went into the Bermuda Triangle.
Triangle, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of
Let me
mystery.
get Stanley here. Stanley is a psychologist, and when all these things are happening, the human being is one key factor. I mean, you from the expert himself, you saw the process that even the captain has to go through. You need to be in that state of alertness. That's why we always want you to take a cup of Lipton anytime you find yourself in that confusion state, just for you to be in that state of alertness. Psychologically, how should one handle such a situation? First of all, from a captain's point of view, then we can move around to the passengers.
Yeah, from the captain's
Yeah.
point of view. Now, in such a situation, you need to calm and then calm the people down. Just as the story you told.
Yeah.
That they fasten your seatbelt, but then give the people hope. Okay? Now, if you don't give them hope, they might end up, probably someone want to jump out of the window. Okay? So you give them hope, calm down. And then usually you guys give us some safety briefing. Now, it's always important for you, the captain, to get people to actually go through these safety, tips. But in most cases, we as human beings do not. And the captain assumes that we have. Now, if you don't calm them down, what will happen is someone might even, just like, let's take even a throttle driver. Where there is an accident, you see the one who sees that an accident is approaching, seated by the driver, may jump, rather holding the driver, so that for him to be able to control, it's not possible. The same thing could happen. So the first thing, I will not say the captain coming out to actually get people to calm down. I would rather ask that probably the air hostess be trained to be able to calm us down, so that the captain will be in the cockpit to be doing what
Can I
he-
come in
Okay,
briefly just
yeah.
to support him? Yes, in actual fact, the purpose of the cabin crew is exactly for safety, to do that. They are trained to take care of the passengers when such situations arise. They are not actually there to serve passengers, excuse me to say. That is just a customer service sort of.
Oh, okay.
But the actual purpose for them being on the aircraft is to take care of safety, and it's part of the regulations. Yes, and then for every number of passengers, you need certain number of cabin crew to be on board, and sometimes it depends on the number of doors or exits on the aircraft. So when you purchase the aircraft, the manufacturer, during the certification stage, yes, the civil aviation of that country, the state of design of the aircraft, will come out with minimum number of cabin crew that should be on board per passenger.
But in terms of rescue, we hear that sometimes when there is danger looming, whilst an aircraft is airborne, you are able to scramble jet fighters and go and rescue. So if the signals had come early, would those on the ground have been able to do anything to salvage the situation, or a crashing aircraft is bound to crash?
It depends on the situation. If you scramble jets to go and rescue the situation, maybe the pilot not responding to any form of communication, but the aircraft is on course. In that case, the jet fighters will fly quite close by, or some kind of formation flight, and actually peep or look through the window, find out what is happening. We had that situation happening some years back. I think Air Helios or something like that in Europe. It was flying from, I think, Greece, whereby the aircraft took a Boeing 737. It was right on course, simply because the captain or the crew, they had programmed the flight into the flight computer. So it's flying normally. But then there was no communication. And they had to scramble jets to go and actually look at what was happening. And they realized that both crew were head down, either sleeping or dead. They flew past the aircraft slowly, about the same speed, looked through all the windows, and all the passengers were also sleeping. So it looked like they were dead. They had to leave the aircraft to continue flying until it ran out of fuel and then crash. Yes, because there's no way you can get into that aircraft, unless of course it's a military aircraft. Some of them there's a way of entering or even
Can you imagine how
flight.
difficult such a situation is
But
going to be?
Actually, what happened was that when the aircraft was at the engineering bay or hangar, the engineers carried out some checks. And with the aircraft, before it takes off, as part of the pilot's checklist, they normally hold the checklist. Either the captain does it, then the co-pilot reads, or vice versa.
Yeah.
You go through maybe pressurization, then the co-pilot will check and respond to the captain that is being checked, then he moves on to the next item. For the pressurization switch, a passenger aircraft, pressurized aircraft, it must be on automatic, so that as the aircraft climbs and you have that differential pressure, the system is in altitude. The system itself adjusts
itself. Yeah.
But while the aircraft was at the engineering bay or hangar, during certain maintenance checks, it was put on manual. And this situation should have been arrested during the final checklist.
It means that someone failed to do
Yes,
it, or worked
somebody.
Yeah.
You see, that's why in aviation you are not supposed to memorize. If you are doing something 1,000 times, always make sure you have
You go by the
the document.
script.
You
Yes.
have your script with you.
So it was like, just mentioned and said, check. It's been checked. Whilst actually he did not touch the switch or look at his position. So when the aircraft took off, as it was climbing, there was no pressurization. In that case, it had to be done manual, and they had assumed that it was on auto. So they ran out of oxygen or air, and that's how come they all died.
Stanley, let me just stay briefly with Stanley. Then I'll come back to you, Dan. I also find out from you if you are up there in the air, then suddenly you realize that there is some technical problem. What do you do? But let's quickly finish with Stanley. Now, you've told us about the captain and the other cabin crew members, what they should do when they handle in such situation. What about those on board, those who are on board the plane? Yeah.
Well, because they are also human beings and they have feelings, thoughts, and they will behave, they need to actually calm themselves down.
It's difficult.
Yes. Let me use myself as an example. I've always been scared of flying. Okay. So one day, I think there was a flight to Kumasi, and I have to be there on a workshop within 45 minutes. So they booked a flight for me. Now, when I gathered the courage, and in fact, I made people to believe that I had already been flying. Then we got into the plane. And as it started to take off, you know, unfortunately, we were sitting on where the carriage. So as it caved in, we felt something boom. Now, here was I trying to muster the courage to pretend, yes.
That, yeah,
Then
they-
close
they
to me
fly.
was this old man. And when we heard the sound, he jumped and held the front, the seats just before him. Come and see. I was sweating all over. Fortunately, because I did psychology and I knew how to calm myself down, I started counting 1 to 10 from the reverse. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Then I tried it with A, B, C, D. So Z, Y. So it took my mind off from the situation. And you see, funny enough, the old man seated by me, because of the exercise I was doing internally, felt that, oh, this guy, he's tough. Meanwhile, I was boiling. And he now started narrating why he was scared. He was a former military person and his experience said things. So anytime he's on a plane, he's always scared. What I would love is not on board. Let's try to calm them down before they plane. Okay? And again, when I was returning, I still had that mindset.
Yeah.
So, I was a bit, worried. Then, here I saw a young boy who was so relaxed and was reading a magazine. I looked at him and I said, wow, he is calm. Then Stanley, you got to be calm. Okay, so it is important, you need to calm yourself. There are several ways you can be chatting with colleagues. You could be reliving some past, experiences that are exciting. You can be doing self-talking, and that can calm you down.
That can calm you down. Now let's look at the family members too. I mean, they are in a very, very difficult situation now as we speak, and day in, day out, we have challenges with them. I mean, how should they also hold themselves? It's difficult.
Yes. In fact, when we're talking about the family members in this situation, my heart goes out to the Malaysians who had relatives on board. Just as my brother said, everybody is blaming the Malaysian. Once you are a Malaysian citizen, you see yourself as blamable. Now my heart goes out to the family members who are Malaysians. What are we doing to them? No one seems to talk about them. In fact, media is silent on them. We are reporting what the Chinese are doing. And you see, it's okay for the Chinese to go out there on demonstration, because when you demonstrate, you actually, that emotional bomb within you.
You get that inner satisfaction.
You when you pour it out, when you talk, you are able to relieve yourself.
Yeah.
But the Malaysian, they are not getting those opportunities. In fact, they need to be calmed. They may be blaming themselves. For instance, there was one story I heard that a gentleman actually removed a ring and then gave it to